Challenge yourself. Without challenge, there's atrophy. Without challenge, there's no growth. Without growth, you are dying. You want to remain strong, you want ease in your life, you have to train for ease.
Our next guest is Shawn Wells. Shawn is acclaimed as the world's greatest formulator and has formulated more than 1,100 products, including 40 plus patents for novel supplement ingredients. Shawn has been featured in 5 globally recognized documentaries, including The Skinny on Fat, The Answer to Cancer, Supplements Revealed, Psychedelics Revealed. Shawn is here to share his experience and maybe teach us a little bit about vulnerability.
That's how you seek greater ease in life, is through periods of unease. When you have chronic unease, that's when it's at dis-ease. But when you have periods of unease, you seek higher and easier levels of.
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity podcast. Our next guest is Shawn Wells, and there are many reasons to look forward to this interview, including the fact that he has a backstory that most of us can identify with. But let me start by saying something pretty amazing. If you have experimented to some degree, almost to any degree, with different supplements in the biohacking space, you've probably already tried one of Shawn's formulas. You see, Shawn is acclaimed as the world's greatest formulator and has formulated more than 1,100 products, including 40 plus patents for novel supplement ingredients. Shawn has been featured in 5 globally recognized documentaries, including The Skinny on Fat, The Answer to Cancer, Supplements Revealed, Psychedelics Revealed. I took the quiz in his book, The Energy Formula, and I'm proud to announce that I scored a 19, which says I'm really on the ball, only some small tweaks needed to be my best self. I know many of my listeners fit into this well-heeled biohacker category. Today, I'm going to try and steer this conversation to provide a little bit of juice for everyone, those just getting started thinking about health and wellness, and those warrior biohackers. Shawn is here to share his experience and maybe teach us a little bit about vulnerability. Shawn, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, Chris.
So I wanted to start a little bit different in this interview. There is no doubt in my mind that vulnerability is paramount to your life journey. I'm reasonably certain there is no other formulator who has the word vulnerability on their website alone, let alone the second tagline on the homepage, which reads, "Formulating the future of nutrition with transparency and vulnerability." Can you talk about this vulnerability? When did you learn to embrace it? How much does it define you? And if you weren't a formulator, I got to ask, would you be teaching people about vulnerability?
Yes, yeah, the last piece for sure. I think I want to retire, which I'm 50 right now. Like, one of the things that I care deeply about is legacy, and some of the most powerful work I've done. Some people may find this, controversial, but was work in psychedelics. And I have done some journeys. My first journey was a life-changing experience. I was very close to suicide. I was dealing with a lot of trauma, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and was working myself into the grave at a rapid pace. And had I not done that work, had I not had those epiphanies and really shifted my heart, my brain, my soul in those ways, I wouldn't be speaking to you right now. I would be in the ground, and we wouldn't be having these conversations, and there'd be a lot of things left undone, people not met, lives not touched, products not made, etc. And I'm so glad that I did do that work, that I did have access to that I did have those experiences, not only because of how it changed my life, but how it's become so deeply important to me that not only like psychedelics per se, but also that aspect of transparency and vulnerability that you're talking about is living in integrity, living in your truth. Like that's absolutely critical. Otherwise there's cognitive dissonance, there's soul dissonance, if you believe in that, like that you're not living out your truth as it is. Like it's quite often we call it a shadow in this space, like your shadow self. These are the things that aren't the evil things or the dark things. These are the things that you hide away from yourself and the rest of the world, the things that you suppress, the things that you're fearful about, people seeing, people finding out. People, on one hand, want to be seen so desperately, want to be heard so desperately. And yet, they're also scared to be seen, scared to be heard, scared of the rejection. Because what if they see the truest part of me, the deepest, most intimate part of myself, and it's rejected? And I mean, that's that's the tough part, right? So ultimately, this is who I am, because I wouldn't be standing here in front of you. Like, this is the most important part of my work. Yes, the energy formula, biohacking, longevity, how to have more mitochondrial biogenesis, and all these things are cool. And it means nothing if you hate yourself. It means nothing if you're not living in your truth. It means nothing if you're in a toxic environment. And so that's really the foundation on which I want to build. Like, before, I was doing biohacking, not as a way to like live a better life, but as a way to survive what I was doing to my body and mind and soul. I hated myself. I was driving harder and harder and harder, trying to accomplish more and more and more, thinking that love is fleeting, that adulation and praise is fleeting, but I desperately wanted it, that love does come with conditions, and nothing was ever good enough, and I was never good enough. And so that's the lens that I'm looking at. And I know a lot of people that have suffered with those thoughts and are continuing to suffer right now with those thoughts. They're their own worst enemy. If anyone talked to you like you talk to you, you wouldn't be their friend. For me, that's why this is the most critical piece of all of this. And I want to bring that vulnerability and truth into everything I do, no matter what it is. And, if you read through the energy formula, there's a lot in here about the things that I've gone through, the things I've suffered through. I didn't get into this psychedelic component and being very close to suicide at that point, but there's a lot of the pain and suffering that's in this book, and how I transform my life in the process through supplements, through mindset, through biohacks. But that's what I can say. Early on, the biohacking was a way to survive my self-loathing. And I think there's a lot of people in that space with that kind of energy. There's a lot of ego and insecurity. And it's not about true peace and health. Like success, what is success? We tend to think of like money as success, or fame as success, or followers as success. To me, success is inner peace, self-love, great people around you, getting a great night's sleep. That's real wealth. And I think a lot of people are very confused, and there's a lot of people that benefit from the other messages. And you have to be mindful of who's giving you these messages, these narratives that are driving us. and think about what actually makes you happy and what actually gives you energy. Do the people around you light you up, or do they pull you down? Does your job light you up or pull you down? Does this podcast, meaning any podcast you're listening to, any book you're reading, any music you're listening to, any movies you're consuming, does it give you energy or does it take it away? And you need to make a list of all these things and say, I'm going to seek the things that are giving me energy and lighting me up. And I'm going to get rid of the things that are draining to me. And it may sound obvious, but people have a lot of things in their lives that are taking energy from them.
Yeah, I think you're right. We've got to figure out how to weed out those things that drain us of energy. But you also said sometimes that thing that drains us of energy is ourselves, right? Like Sam Harris, author of Waking Up, talks about, like, if you were to actually slow down and listen to what you're telling yourself, it's like somebody following you around your house telling you, why can't you find your keys? Like, how did you put on the wrong sock today? Like, just berating you. And that's not a welcome thing. And so this journey that you're talking about, I think, is really important that people embrace it. And I think there's another important piece of it, which is, you were, as you said, at the brink of suicide and jumped into psychedelics and really found kind of some solace there, and some awareness. At the point you'd written the book, right? Successful book. You are the world's greatest formulator. And I think the important message can be like, hey, if you're out there and you're struggling, but part of you is saying, I shouldn't be struggling because I have this fame or this wealth or this book or whatever, like, no, like, you can still be in that situation and suffering, and yes, be aware to go seek solutions.
I'll take it one step further. Like, I joined a mastermind early on when masterminds were kind of a new idea, and it was with Lewis Howes, who is, pretty famous on social media. And I was in a small group where all the people in the room had millions of social media followers, were making tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars. People were beautiful. And I was like, who am I to be here? And then I noticed that everyone was looking around the room with the same look. And I was like, oh man, imposter syndrome really only happens to people that are successful, people that are driven. It's a badge of success that you feel like, do I belong? It's only when you get in these rooms that you feel this way. It's only when you're driven to a high level that you feel this way. And the second thing I thought that eventually gave me so much peace was, if I'm looking around the room and everyone is freaking incredible, absolutely amazing, the thought shouldn't be, do I belong? The thought is, I definitely belong, and I'm every bit as good because I'm in this room. I'm surrounded by talented, beautiful, successful people. I must be at that vibration. I must be talented, beautiful, successful to be here. And that gave me so much peace. Yeah.
Man, that's really cool. I want to dig a little bit deeper, because something that came out, I was reading the energy formula as you were talking about a lack of self-esteem. You kind of been transparent with that. When I first hear people say the world's greatest whatever, in your case formula, my first thought is that it's marketing, potentially grandiose marketing. And as I kept getting ready for this interview, kept coming across, one, your accolades, so it's like well deserved. Like, I think consciously, like, that was easy for you to accept. But I found testimonials from established people in health, longevity, and biohacking space, many of whom I've actually interviewed, and they said that you're an amazing formula, and more interesting, an amazing person. So talk a little bit more about, for me, if you're talking about self-esteem and you're also talking about the world's greatest formulator, how was the process of you accepting that, right? Because you were just talking about imposter syndrome. Like, did somebody throw that name on you and you begrudgingly took it, and then
Yes.
you kind of slowly talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. It was a colleague of mine, Dr. Jacob Wilson, when he would get up and speak in front of the ISSN, the NSCA. These are pretty significant academic bodies in sports nutrition and exercise physiology. Um, he would call me that. He would refer to me as that. And it became something that, yes, it was difficult to accept. And other people started to call me that. And instead of begrudging around it, I kept thinking I am going to live up to that. And I'm going to step into that. I'm going to be that. And you know what? It has nothing to do whether if anyone else calls themselves that, great. Good for you. Call yourself that. Be that. Because this is an opinion. This is subjective. And like the saying about anyone that could beat Michael Jordan has to believe they're better than Michael Jordan. So the only way you'll be better than me is to believe you're better than me and go for it. Like I'm not criticizing anyone that wants to believe that they're the best. Like that's great. I actually want that for you. I want to be inspired by other people. I want to be challenged by other people that are moving the industry forward. So I have nothing against someone else being that, but I'm also proud to accept what's been bestowed upon me.
Very cool. All right, so let's jump into, provide a little bit of your backstory for those who haven't read your book yet, because they're going to go get your book and and read it. Share some of your journey to becoming a supplement formulator.
Oh man. Well, so I grew up in a very chaotic home. I don't want to relive my childhood, but it was difficult, and it led me towards overeating. It led me towards obesity. It led me to criticizing myself, really bullying myself, and I was extremely overweight, morbidly obese, and I got into college and started to work out, started to read these muscle magazines and supplement guides and encyclopedias and hanging out in GNCs and vitamin shops for hours. And I fell in love with supplements. I started using creatine and protein and glutamine and BCAAs and, working out and seeing this massive transformation in my body. I went to a doctor in between my sophomore and junior year at business school. And I was, telling him all about supplements. He was looking at my body composition difference and he was like, oh my God, like this is incredible, like good job. And I thought when I told him about supplements, he was going to laugh at me because this is the 90s and a doctor. And he drew out a lifeline for me between 20 and 80 and said, why not be happy between here and here? I didn't even ask him for this advice, but he
Right,
basically
just
saw,
for clarity. So between the ages of 20 and 80, he's like, okay, so what are you going to do with that space?
yeah, because he knew I was like in business school and I was doing a great job, but he could see how passionate I was about supplements. And when he said that, it radically changed my life path and thinking what was possible. You got to remember, I didn't have Oprah Winfrey. I didn't have Tony Robbins. I didn't have social media. I didn't have Instagram, TikTok, and, life coaches and whatever. I was doing what my dad told me to do, be smart, go do business. And I was like, man, I want to formulate supplements. I want to put on this lab coat like this guy in like these ads. At the time, it was Dr. Marv Hoyer for Muscle Tech, and he had this like lab coat, and he'd have beakers with colored stuff, and he was making supplements for bodybuilders. And I was like, man, that's super cool. So because this one doctor gave me permission, and this other doctor was someone that I could see doing it. It made it all possible for me. And if it wasn't for those two guys, I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't be where I am. So his words changed my life path pretty radically. And then I ended up going back to school after I finished up my business degree, got 2 years worth of prereqs, and then got into my dream school, UNC Chapel Hill, and studied nutrition and biochemistry, and got my RD, and started working clinically. I worked clinically for about a decade, but all the while on weekends and evenings, on holidays, I was working in the supplement industry, writing, going to shows, working at supplement shops, like basically mom and pop shops, and just honing my craft, understanding supplements and working on message boards. And it became a deep passion. And then I got hired on at Dymatize to be a full-time formulator. And then I've never looked back ever since.
Quick question: are you still in touch with that doctor? Like, does he know the impact that he had on you?
No,
Yeah.
I can't find him. I never could find him. And I forgot his name. Years had passed before I kind of like dug into my brain on this whole story, and really was writing it out for this book. And it's unfortunate, but it's kind of cool in its own way that, like, it wasn't for any reason. Like, it's just he felt the passion to tell me that it's okay, that I can pursue this. And I love that. And so I've just been paying it forward ever since. I think about him all the time. And instead, like, when I can't pay him back, I'm just going to keep paying it forward.
That's awesome. Yeah, a comment here or there to the right person can change everything. So let's talk a little bit about like supplementing. Do you think that everyone should be supplementing? Are there certain groups of people that absolutely should be supplementing and other that maybe not? Like, how do you kind of see this whole, I'm a human, how much supplementation should I be doing?
I think everyone should be supplementing, and it's not because I'm a formulator or that I'm in the industry of supplements. It's more the other way around. I'm in the industry of supplements because I believe in it deeply. I think, like, the people that say, oh, you can get supplements from food, you don't need any, or sorry, you can get all your nutrients from food and you don't need supplements. Not so true. And I'll make this argument all day. One, we're not getting the nutrients in our soil that we used to. Two, things are GMO. There's kind of less available nutrition in the food supply, period. And then one of the biggest things is we're exposed to more toxins, more chemicals, more endocrine disruptors, more stressors physiologically than any point in history. There's more than 5,000 chemicals introduced into our food supply and our kind of just environment in general through companies. 5,000 chemicals every year that are generally untested. And we don't know what the impact of them is. And we certainly don't know the impact of them when crossed over into each other, when there's multiple chemicals. And so we don't know. We don't know what the impact of that is. But I can tell you, like EMFs, the amount of stressors that are on us is massive. And the toll it's taking on our body is massive. And the amount of microplastics and nanoplastics is significant that we're getting exposed to. And all of this is taking a toll. And there's no way that you can honestly believe that the nutrition from your fruits and vegetables is going to be enough. It's not. There's no way. And when you study, like, Dr. Linus Pauling back in the late 70s, early 80s, like did some really seminal work around orthomolecular dosing. And it started with vitamin C, where at the time, like 60 milligrams was our RDA. And that was enough to avoid scurvy and avoid a deficiency. But that wasn't understanding what's optimal in the body, what's optimized. And he was looking at gram doses, not 60 milligrams, but grams of vitamin C a day. And so there is so much more to be studied in terms of not only avoiding deficiencies and focus on lifespan, but a focus on health span, living disease free, and a focus on optimization.
I had the chance to see Linus Pauling speak at the University of Houston. It was pretty amazing. That guy was amazing. Two Nobel Prizes, won the Nobel Peace Prize. And yeah, I think in that speech, he talked about torturing his students by giving them so much vitamin C, and then they needed to, flush it out. And it was a fascinating talk. So you talked about like 5,000 chemicals. Would you separate supplements into some parts detoxification and other parts like maybe non-detox related supplementation? Would that be a way you might categorize things? And is there any other categories that you might throw in there?
I haven't thought about it specifically like that, but that does make sense. And I think where it gets complicated is the idea of hormesis. And that's an interesting one. So, even with antioxidants, for example, like going to, vitamin E or vitamin C or these different things, there's different levels where one, it's an antioxidant, but two, it can hit some threshold where you go high enough and it's a pro-oxidant. It's literally causing damage. But there's also a threshold somewhere in there, the Goldilocks zone, if you will, like where it's an ideal amount. And it's causing an ideal amount of stress and an ideal amount of adaptation. So it's not just serving as a nutrient or substrate to improve your body's function and serve to make something or speed along a chemical reaction, but it's literally causing EU stress, a positive stress. And this is like you going to the gym and doing damage to your body, right? But it's a good amount of damage. It's the right damage. It's the right amount of damage that your body responds and adapts and grows stronger to. And so that's a really fascinating part of supplementation right now, where, for example, like, one of the ingredients I'm known to have brought to the market, dihydroberberine, which is a metabolite of berberine, we know that berberine at some point causes mitochondrial stress. And we're seeing that there's longevity associated with berberine, much like there was metformin. And metformin can cause this mitochondrial stress. And yet we don't see people losing energy, having more disease when they're on metformin or berberine or dihydroberberine. We see just the opposite. And I believe, yes, there is some kind of stress, but it's a positive stress. And we know with the mitochondria, when you have the right amount of stress, you can get mitochondrial biogenesis. You can actually create more mitochondria. You can reverse mitochondrial dysfunction. You can improve the function of that unhealthy mitochondria. So this is like where there needs to be a pivot in terms of thinking. And by the way, it's called mitohormesis when it's referring to mitochondria, that we need to shift and think that, there's positive stresses, and there may be a stress moment on a level of certain nutrients that is ideal. And so, yes, there's things that are substrates. Yes, there's things that enhance chemical reactions. Yes, there are things that work on detox pathways like autophagy and mitophagy, for example. But there's this other interesting category that I think is a significant one that I think will have a big shift in supplementation and thinking in terms of even medicine. And it'll start to connect. I mean, it's a big part of what my book is about, like this idea of like allostatic capacity and allostatic load, is that it's eustress until you hit the Goldilocks zone, and then it becomes distress. And as long as you're in eustress or Goldilocks, you're good. You have the ideal amount of stress. And when we think about our workload, our spiritual life, our financial life, our relationships, our supplementation, our diet, our workouts, everything should be thought of as this. Challenge yourself. Without challenge, there's atrophy. Without challenge, there's no growth. Without growth, you are dying. You want to remain strong, you want ease in your life, you have to train for ease.
I like there's I forget who said it, but like that aging is the relentless pursuit of comfort, and what you're talking about is that's not the goal. That's how you age. Maybe there's a category of like detox and then health and then longevity, maybe, and they're interrelated, right? Health and longevity, but maybe there are some that are a little more focused on longevity. You mentioned metformin and then dihydroberberine. I had heard that berberine has very similar kind of responses as metformin. Metformin is known to reduce kind of muscle genesis, muscular genesis. So you tend to try not to, at least I've kind of read, don't take it on days when you're doing heavy lifting. Don't do it on days where you're actually getting a really good hormetic stress. Does dihydroberberine have a similar response? Has that study been done?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's on days, that has been said, but I would say like not around the workout.
Mm.
I think it's just like, potentially doing like, uh, cold plunges and things like that, may have, uh, and see, again, it all depends. It all depends on what you're being exposed to. This is the bio individuality. One is, what are your genetics? What is your threshold for stress? Meaning the size of your stress bucket, your allostatic capacity. Is your bucket big or small? And then how much, like, how cold is it? How long were you exposed to that cold? How much stress did you just go through prior? If you had a 5-minute workout and you're in 60-degree cold shower, is that going to have a negative impact? No. Maybe if you were just doing like a CrossFit competition and, going for your PR and your WOD or, whatever, and then you're doing like a 40-degree cold plunge and you're fasting and you're also stressed out at home and you're going through maybe a divorce possibly, and your wife just lost her job and bills are tight. Okay, like this is a lot on your physiology. So this is where it's variable day to day, and you need to be mindful, listen to your body about what kind of stress it's under. Because once that bucket is overflowing, you're not going to grow the bucket. You're just going to become overwhelmed, and then it's distress, and then it's counterproductive, and that's leading to disease.
So when you think about supplementation, what would you say is the most important thing for us to do as it relates to supplementation?
The most important thing to do as it relates to supplementation, I think it's going to go back to bioindividuality. One, you need to understand who you are and what works for you and what your goals are. What are your genetics, your epigenetics? What does your microbiome look like? What does your blood work look like? What are your goals? Are you trying to get pregnant? What point are you in your life? What stresses are you dealing with? What toxins are you potentially exposed to? Be it environmental, be it relational, whatever it is. You need to be mindful of that. Maybe you're in a home that has mold and you can't get out of it for the moment, or so being mindful of what your goals are and what you're being exposed to and where your baseline is at currently. And then, of course, like working with someone to manage that, someone who is continuing to measure with you, that's giving you accountability, that can take a look at the blood work, your genetics, your microbiome, and talk to you globally about how you're feeling and how you're presenting. And that's going to then make a clear path on what supplements make sense. But you have to be mindful too of like certain supplements. There's in every study I've ever looked at, there's hyper and hypo responders. There's super and supra responders, like meaning like people that just don't really respond at all, and some people that respond way above everyone else. And then there's the mean. And we're always told about the mean in these studies. We're always told about the statistical average. But the fact is, there's people all along this scale, and some people are way out on the edges. And there's going to be supplements for everyone where it worked great for someone, but it doesn't work great for you. And beyond this, if you are a physician or clinician, you know about the idea of polypharmacy and that certain medications interact with other medications, interact with food. And there is a polypharmaceutical effect where you're not sure what exactly might happen to the body when you add this, this, and this. The same thing is true with supplementation. Maybe supplementation in food, supplementation food in your genetics, supplementation food, genetics, and stress. Like, what's the net result? You're going to be the best judge of all that. And that's where the bio-individuality comes in. So that's where this book is really about exploring your goals, exploring your baseline, exploring these stacks and what works for you. And I tell you what worked for me in the book, but by no means is what worked for me what will work for you. It can be a guideline, but that's all it is.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
Is there any testing that you would recommend to kind of help steer you in the right direction? Obviously there's some classics of, maybe you've got a vitamin D deficiency or vitamin E. I think I ended up with a vitamin D deficiency at some point and was prescribed some vitamin D. Any kind of testing that you would tend to recommend?
Yeah, there's probably about 10 tests that I think are absolutely invaluable to see where you're at. Things like CRP to test your systemic inflammation, hemoglobin A1C to see where your blood glucose and glycation is at, your blood sugar damage. Blood sugar is a huge part of the disease process, as is inflammation. And this whole idea of syndrome X or metabolic syndrome, basically 99% of disease is metabolic in nature, and almost all biological aging is metabolic in nature. So that's being driven largely by blood glucose and then secondarily inflammation. So those are really important. Looking at things like your cardiovascular health, I do not like cholesterol at all as a marker. But lipoprotein A, I think, is a wonderful one to look at. And then, as far as oxidative stress, you can look at oxidized LDL. I think that's a good one. I do think looking at your vitamin D status is important, as you mentioned. This is something that goes way beyond being a vitamin. It truly is a hormone, and it's involved in so many things in your body, involved in speaking of blood sugar and diabetes, but also immunity, how much body fat you might accumulate, how much testosterone you might have. I mean, vitamin D is so critical. And then beyond that, I think looking at like your MTHFR, which is, on the genetic side, is really important to understand, because over a third of us are uh, potentially going to have toxicity associated with having folic acid. We're not making those 4 enzymatic conversion steps. So I think that's really important to look at, to understand, to know, and then to see what your folic acid status is. Also looking for women in particular, but men also, is iron. Just doing complete iron panels, understanding every step along the way of how iron is transported, iron is controlled, iron is getting into the cell. Because iron for women, obviously massive on the anemic front, especially when they're, having menses on a regular basis. But two, with men, we're seeing that iron toxicity, iron load is deeply associated to longevity. And as a matter of fact, there was a study where I want to say it's men that gave blood twice a year on average lived 2 to 3 years longer. There's pretty much nothing I know that's as low lift as that's going to have that much of an impact.
Yeah, provided you're not afraid of needles, which I'm not. But like, you're right. Like, you just got to sit there. You got to relax. You're actually helping people. There's so like it's a win. In your book, you talk about a simple way to assess your energy baseline. Can you talk about the importance of assessing your energy baseline, and maybe some clinical ways that you might do that, and then simpler ways that you outlined in your book?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the idea of, first off, the energy formula is experimentation, nutrition, exercise routines, growth in your tribe. The book is broke into these 6 hallmarks, these 6 columns or pillars, if you will, of health. And I break apart the importance of all of these different areas to giving you your global energy. But going back to what I was stating earlier, like, one of the biggest things is just keeping a log on what things are lighting you up and what things are not, what things are draining. But looking at labs like you're talking about, that's where I came up with the idea of how well your mitochondria are functioning. And really, it's a product of 3 things. We can't really assess mitochondria directly as of yet. There's some labs that are being worked on, that are being tested, that are being validated. But I would say understanding glycation, inflammation, and oxidation are going to be the most important pieces there to saying how well your mitochondria are functioning. And that is that oxidized LDL, hemoglobin A1C, and CRP. That's the inflammation, oxidation, and glycation pieces. And if those are ideal, then your mitochondria are probably ideal. But also recognizing that your physiology is going to affect your subjective energy. And also your subjective energy is going to impair your physiology. So this is where being aware of the things that light you up or give you energy across your life, making a list of those, maybe putting a number to them, is going to impact how much energy you have for your day. I mean, I could not change your diet, not change peptides, stem cells, supplements, but just give you a job that you really love, and tomorrow you would get out of bed with 10x the energy. But also, I could give you peptides and stem cells and supplements and change your diet and give you exercise. And maybe tomorrow you'd get out of bed with more energy without a change in your day-to-day life. So this is where it's important to understand how one affects the other.
I think in your book you had this kind of very subjective kind of assessment of, I can't remember, like, how do you feel when you wake up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go over that, please.
Well, I think you remember it better than me. Um,
Well, I did
but,
just read. By the way,
I'd
I
have
have a book
to.
also, and if you were to ask me questions about my book, I might not get it get it all right. But I mean, I think we can conceptually go over it, right? Like, how do you feel when you get up in the morning? And you've been talking about this, kind of being aware of what gives you energy and what takes away energy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have these surveys throughout the book, and like the experiment surveys, like, how seriously do you take your health and wellness? When did you last have your full blood panel done? How well do you know your body? And there's, of course, one, two, and three, and they're subjective and in terms of how you'd score this. But how often do you try something new around your nutrition, fitness, or self care routine? Do you feel like you have control of your health? How experienced would you say you are at biohacking your body with things like supplements to enhance your life? When was the last time you felt truly aligned with your body, mind, and spirit? That's just one chapter's survey. And the point is that you take that survey at the beginning, and as this book will help guide you on your journey, and you check back in with this survey. And I'm actually developing a full course around this, and I've updated it, everything in the book, and I have a full video course that's coming out early next year in 2025, doing these exact surveys and doing the interventions that we're talking about, and I'm guiding you. And again, it's not me saying everything that works for me. It's me saying, here's some things that worked for me. Here's some things that you can try, but be your own experimenter. That's an important part of this book, is saying, are you an experimenter? Are you someone who's willing to try new things? Are you willing to see how your body responds to different stressors, to different ideas, to different paths? And I believe, like, creativity, some of these kinds of aspects of life are going to be so key to your happiness, to like creativity and challenge and like just trying new things. Like, this is like a huge part of like the blue zone mentality, is, are you willing to step into what's uncomfortable and be comfortable with the uncomfortable? And that's how you seek like greater ease in life, is through periods of unease. When you have chronic unease, that's when it's at dis-ease. But when you have periods of unease, you seek higher and easier levels of ease. And that's so critical. That mindset is so critical to think about, is that, it takes, someone who's an adventurer, an explorer, an experimenter, to find those things.
That's yeah. And you're talking about, again, you've got to hermetically stress your body so that it has this response so that you're better. And that can be with relationships. Like, if you're an introvert, that can be going out. If you're an extrovert, that can be like quiet time to yourself. Like, these are things that you need to be exploring. In your book, you mentioned Mito is the new keto, which I think was
Yeah.
predicting the future. As I don't know if you've read Dr. Gundry's book called Unlocking the Keto Code, which is published like less than a year after your book. It was entirely about mitochondrial uncoupling. Talk about why you say Mito is the new keto.
Because I believe that, like I said, aging is biological more than it is chronological. And disease is metabolic in nature. And if something is metabolic in nature, then it has to do with the number of your mitochondria and the function of your mitochondria. Mitochondria, if you remember, are the cellular powerhouse, the little factory inside the cell that's creating ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate, the energy currency for your body. And you might think that there's just one mitochondria that's like in those diagrams, that's what you saw, but there's up to 5,000 mitochondria in a cell, on a more energy dependent cell. So a cardiomyocyte, a heart cell, is going to have a lot of mitochondria. Brain cells are going to have a lot of mitochondria. And these are the ones we're going to notice the biggest differences in mitochondria dysfunction and not having enough number of mitochondria is in these energy dependent cells. And where do we feel most depleted? Cardiovascularly, cognitively, brain and heart, right? And so that's where the energy is most important. And that's where disease is going to come from. So when we're looking at disease, when we're looking at on the opposite end of that spectrum, longevity, vitality, having energy for life, that's going to revolve around the mitochondria. And so the more we understand the health of our mitochondria, the number of our mitochondria, then the more we're going to have a greater life in terms of longevity, in terms of happiness and energy in general. So that is really like what the book revolves around is how to optimize your mitochondria and how to have more energy for life.
So I have a kind of an interesting question. When people find out that you are a supplement formulator, what is their most common question?
What supplements should I be taking?
So my next question, if you only had 3 to 5 supplements, like you mentioned when you travel, like half of your luggage is supplements. If you only had 3 to 5, like what are your absolute must-haves?
Magnesium, vitamin D, dihydroberberine, ergothioneine, and probably paraxanthine for my energy. Paraxanthine is a metabolite of caffeine. It's an ingredient that I brought to the market. It's a much cleaner ergogen, meaning giving you energy. It's going to inhibit adenosine, just like caffeine would, but caffeine tends to be toxic. About 60% of the population are slow metabolizers of caffeine and get more side effects than benefits. Whereas with paraxanthine, we see pretty much everyone gets benefits and almost no side effects whatsoever. And they certainly aren't slow metabolizers or have issues there either. So paraxanthine is just a very clean cognitive enhancement nootropic experience, and one that I love taking every single day. Vitamin D, again, like I was talking about how critical it is to not only being a vitamin and bone health and gut health and immune health and brain function, but you can go on and on and on. Testosterone, libido, fertility. It's a really critical nutrient. And same with magnesium, over 300 chemical reactions in the body that it's a cofactor for. About 75% of us are deficient. Same with vitamin D, by the way. And like when you are taking enough vitamin D, you feel more relaxed. You get better sleep. You have better cognitive function. And you're making more ATP and having more energy. Dihydroberberine, basically, one, it enhances GLP. It enhances GLP-1 as well as AMPK. So longevity, improving appetite, improving insulin sensitivity. You can put on more muscle, reduce fat mass. It's really an incredible ingredient to not only reduce blood glucose and insulin, but also reduce inflammation and dyslipidemia. It's the most powerful anti-aging nutrient I know of. And then ergothioneine is something that may become a new vitamin. Really fascinating trace amino acid associated with longevity, in particular cognitive function, but it protects the mitochondria. So that goes back to heart and brain in particular. And we're seeing it really not only improve mitochondrial biogenesis, but mitophagy, so that cellular or mitochondrial detox pathway. So really, again, one of the most potent longevity ingredients that I know of, and it's going to enhance cellular energy.
I think one that you're excited about is DL185, supposed to help increase muscle protein synthesis. that
Yep.
is like protein synthesis and kind of avoiding sarcopenia has been on my radar. I don't know for I don't know six months. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we all know that protein, getting enough protein is going to be key to maintaining muscle. Most people, as they age, have anabolic resistance or leucine resistance, where they're not getting enough leucine, they're not getting enough protein. Protein is the substrate. The amino acids that make up protein are needed to build muscle, to build tissues throughout your body. But leucine is driving muscle protein synthesis. So leucine is the key amino acid. And what we know is vegan proteins have about half the level of leucine that animal proteins have. So if you are a vegan, you either need to double your protein or take additional leucine at each meal. What we've found is that this seems counterintuitive, that a free amino acid of leucine is actually slower than a dipeptide of leucine. And this is because the peptide 1 transporter, the PEP1 transporter, and that transporter preferentially takes up 2 and 3 amino acid chains, these di and tripeptides, over a free amino acid. Why that is because those are bioregulatory signals that we want to go ahead of that substrate, tell your body what to do with that substrate, what to do with that protein. So as these proteins are hydrolyzed down, these 2 or 3 amino acid signals are really important. And along those lines, when we did a form of dileucine, L-leucine monohydrate, we found that it yields about 60% more gram for gram muscle protein synthesis. It's 189% faster. You have 86% more leucine in the muscle. So it's a game changer when it comes to sarcopenia, which is muscle loss as we age, when it comes to cachexia, with muscle loss with aging, with disease. So this is a really exciting compound that I believe will have a huge impact on aging, on bodybuilding, on disease processes, etc.
60% increase in Genesis, 189 times faster. Yeah, I'll be doing a little bit more research and procuring some. All right, so now I have some wrap up questions. Shawn, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
I don't know that I've actually thought about that. I know, Dave Asprey talks about 180, and those things sound like hyperbolic. And Brian Johnson talks about don't die. And, I think we're right now at barring Methuselah in the Bible. I think maybe 124 is the oldest person that's been known in terms of modern day science.
And how long would you like to live?
As long as I'm happy. I think it's more about quality of life. Like, so one thing that I've been looking at is there's the idea of lifespan, which is how long you live, which doesn't matter as much to me. There's health span, which is how long you live free from disease. But I've been looking at the idea of something I call youth span,
Mm.
where it's how long you live young and vital, how long you're living a great life. And, you could live 180 miserable years, or you could live 50 incredible years. I'll take the 50 incredible years any day. Of course, if you can combine the length of life with an amazing life, that would be great. But at some point, I think, we're meant to pass on. I think we're meant to hand things off. And I think there's a lot of joy in being a mentor, into being a guide, into being sage, into being wise, into, calming down your life and being the elder. Right? It's we're in a weird society that's fearful of that. And through most cultures throughout history, that was something that was revered. And we're in a society right now that's taught us to be fearful of that. Native Americans, like when you'd see all the wrinkles in their face, that was like a way of showing, like, every wrinkle means wisdom, means insight. And now it means something that's horrible. And we have to rethink where all that's coming from and who benefits from that type of thinking.
Yeah, I interviewed a Dr. Paul Nash, who's a gerontologist, and I love what he says is, which pushes exactly what you're talking about. Everything is age appropriate, right? Like so like we should be living youthfully into the future. So I love your kind of concept of youth span. What 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts, to longevity and a long health span would you share?
Okay. I love cold plunges big time. And if you can't do cold plunges, do contrasting. So in a shower, go from hot for 30 seconds to cold for 30 seconds, hot for 30 seconds, cold for 30 seconds. You can do this every single day for next to nothing. I do it when I'm traveling at hotels. I love it. But if I can get a cold plunge in, they've shown that it increases dopamine for 3 to 4 hours. You're feeling high. It is incredible. It reduces systemic inflammation. It improves your resilience, increases brown adipose tissue and thermogenesis, meaning improves your metabolism. Really, one of the most powerful things that I know of to do. Along those lines, just getting light every day. I believe the photobiomodulation, as it's called, is still underappreciated. I have blue eyes and I'm very susceptible to light, blue light in particular at night. And so for me, when I get that blue light at night, I am up till all hours. I have to wear the blue light blocking glasses. That was a game changer to me, to my circadian rhythm and my quality of sleep when I found that out. But on the flip side, I've also found out I have the seasonal affective disorder with these, I think in particular, blue eyes, that when I don't get light in the morning, I am depressed, I am fatigued. And I've found that I use a light from a company called Light Path. I have a box that I travel with that's, about the size of my book. And it has blue and red light. And so I use that in the morning before I get up. I use the blue and red light and I feel amazing. I feel turned on and woke up. And it's like I had 2 cups of coffee without drinking any of that. It's amazing. Lastly, I'm going to say being kind to yourself, going back to the idea of if anyone talked to you like you talk to you, you wouldn't be their friend. And not only kind to yourself, but being that explorer, that inventor, that creative, that experimenter. There was 2 things that Tim Ferriss found that highly successful people had in common when he interviewed all the hundreds and hundreds of people, and he had the book Tools of Titans. Number 1 is they had some kind of morning routine where they made their bed. They did the same thing every morning. It started their day with control, with precision, with groundedness, with calmness. And that was really important. The type of morning routine was varied, but a morning routine was there. And then secondly, they were experimenters. They were people that tried new things, that explored. And I think that is so critical for health, longevity, and happiness. And so those are the things that I think I'd recommend the most.
All right, so we got cold plunge, we've got light exposure, be kind to yourself, and kind of throwing in a morning routine and some experimentation. Can you think of 1 to 2 things that people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
I think it's going back to this idea of thinking there's the magic bullet and they're doing the, PRP, the stem cells, the peptides, the terzepatide, the, whatever is hot, the dihydroberberine, even the whatever. And, thinking, well, what's like the 5-minute abs and whatever the shortcuts are. And I understand that's kind of the basis for biohacking, but I really don't like that idea of biohacking at its core. Because if you're taking the idea of a shortcut, you're shortcutting yourself and your own self-worth. You need to be someone that's building on a solid foundation. This is going to come from self-love. This is going to come from removing the toxic people out of your life. This is going to come from a job that you enjoy, a relationship that you enjoy. There's always going to be challenges, but you need to find the things that light you up. Then you can build upon it and do all these biohacks. But all the biohacks on an unstable ground, when you're building that home on sand, that is pointless. That is not the way to proceed. And if anything, a lot of that stuff can cause stress because you're not getting the results you want. You're spending lots of money. You're spending hours every day trying to think about how to do all these things. Maybe you're coming up with charts on all the supplements, all the peptides, and all of this stuff is costing you tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what are you getting out of it? If your body is in sympathetic nervous system, it's fighting all of these things. It's resisting all of these things. It's not until you can get your body into parasympathetic, get your body relaxed, that it's going to receive.
Excellent. Shawn, how can people contact you?
ShawnWells.com, ShawnWells, Shawn. And I have tons of information there. I have links to all my stacks, the book, the chorus that's coming out, newsletters. Everything's free that you can consume there. So there's no cost to anything in terms of information that I'm providing. And then just go to @Shawn Wells on social media, in particular Instagram. I put a lot of effort on that in terms of infographics and videos and explanations of how these supplements work and pathways and stacks. So yeah, I'd appreciate it. And if you have any questions, you can ask me on those platforms and I answer.
Excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
I have so many more ingredients coming. So that's exciting. And the chorus, like I said, that's launching early 2025 on the energy formula. That's going to be really, really exciting. I already have on Mind Valley, which is a really great platform for personal growth. I have a quest, which is like a masterclass on supplements. The energy formula chorus will be broader about your entire life. But if you want to become a formulator or understand how to better supplement, that's a great place to access that information. And I train you through a series of videos there. So, yeah.
Very cool. So the book is The Energy Formula. It's also available in audiobook. That's how I consumed it. You actually do the reading. I really love that. That was great. You can find him at ShawnWells.com, ShawnWells.com. And I actually subscribe to the newsletter. I recommend you do the same. And on social media, you can find him at Shawn Wells. And he also, you can find I guess like a teaser for the course that you're about to launch next year on Mind Valley. So that's how you can connect, Shawn. Shawn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Chris.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.